All right, so let's see here. Start recording. All right, everybody. Hey, welcome to the Go for CEO community. Thank you so much again for attending with us. And today we have a special guest, a little bit different of a business model. So I'm excited to kind of bring you this different story so that you could see some of the untraditional and traditional type businesses, on the Go for CEO community. And again, just to remind you, it's from startups to 25 million in revenue, bringing on CEOs, founders, people that have taken over businesses and really just become that CEO of their life, and especially in this business. So I'm excited to have a person that we have some kids that go to the same school. We've gotten a chance to become friendly, and just did lunch with about 4 or 5 other guys, and it was a great time and just getting to know a lot of these guys. So I asked him to come on, and he's been gracious enough to give us his time tonight. So welcome to Go for CEO, Mr. Brad Metzger. How are you?
Very good. Thanks for having me on, John. I really appreciate the invite, and I've had a chance to listen to some of your videos and really like the channel so far. So appreciate it.
I appreciate it, man. So yeah, looking forward to hearing this story. Standard Farm Company LLC. So what an enjoyable type of business. I was doing a little research about it, but I know in our pre-show here you shared a little bit about the insights of not necessarily being handed a farm. So let's get into a little bit about your background, a little bit about your thought pattern, and why you started to then look at the entrepreneurial spirit, especially in the farming business. So take it away, Brad.
Sure. So I grew up in Naperville, went to Naperville North High School, and after that I went to college, went to Northwestern, but while I was going to school, I also worked at the Board of Trade, and that's kind of what got me really interested in farming. It sounds kind of strange that would have gotten me into farming, but I was a commodities broker. So I started out in the corn pit. We traded meal, oil, wheat, soybeans. So I had a chance to see the side of the business where it was the hedging, the actual grain that would come from the farms. And I started out in the corn pit, like I said, and ended up moving over to a desk that was on the floor, and eventually became a broker. Started in high school in the summers, and eventually turned it into a full-time job. And did that for a total of 14 years, working down at the Board of Trade. Eventually, as things started to change, I don't know if you're familiar with the changes that happened at the Board of Trade over the last 10, 15 years, but it's transitioned from being open outcry, so a very wild environment, a lot of hand signals, pretty crazy, a lot of yelling and screaming, to electronic markets. So as that market started changing, I looked at what some of the other guys who I worked around, what they had done, what they transitioned into, and a lot of guys left the pits and went to trade at a desk, which I tried as well, but a lot of them ended up going back to their family farm. A lot of the commodity brokers down at the Board of Trade came from a farming family, and then branched off, and some of the brothers kept the farm going while they traded the markets at the Board of Trade. So I heard a lot of stories, and the Board of Trade was kind of a stressful thing. It was starting to change a little bit. So listening to what other people were doing, they went back to their family farm. They farmed, and really seemed to, every time I talked to someone that had left, they seemed to really enjoy it. I transitioned from the floor to a desk. I ended up trading the screen for a while, did some brokerage for some farmers, and got to talk to them, see what their business was like, and really kind of started to fantasize about what it would be like to be a farmer. And so after, I still trade to this day, but as I was trading, I started thinking about, it would be nice to go out into the field. So I branched off a little bit, bought some farmland, and started farming in Will County, Illinois. We bought our first piece of land in 2013, and then slowly started to gain some ground after that. So in 2016, I became a full-time farmer. Still traded on the side, but farmed full-time. Gathered enough ground to actually do it, and became opened up a corn and soybean operation, and that's kind of since.
Awesome, awesome. Well, interesting voyage, right? Obviously you went to a fantastic college. You put in the studies. You get into this market where it's cutthroat in some ways, right? I've heard about commodities. Some people want to jump out of the window sometimes. Some people want to go crazy and buy a boat, right? As much money as you can make in commodities. But awesome. So let's go through that first part. Obviously you're starting to think about these changes in your life, thinking about the changes in the automation and what's going on in the pits and all that type of stuff. Walk us through, did you get a commercial real estate broker? Did you just talk to some families that owned land? Walk us through that step by step on kind of how you formulated that, and then also, did you find funding for it as well?
So funding farming is a very capital intensive business. It's not something that most people just decide to get into. It's not a typical transitional career path. You don't usually jump into farming. It's usually something you're born into. You can pass along the land, the equipment, and all that. So my path was definitely unique. I guess I started getting into it just talking to family friends that had some farm friends in the family. We were lucky enough to have some family friends that were farmers. So I kind of got my start in just talking to them. So Jim Robbins Farms out in Will County, Illinois. Great farmer, pretty large operation. He kind of took me under his wing and showed me what he does. I joined him for a summer, saw what he did out in the field, really enjoyed it, and just a great guy to learn from. He ended up he was the Master Farmer of the Year last year. So some really great people to learn from. But as land became available, he would tell me about it. And in 2013, some ground came up that he thought was pretty good. And so instead of purchasing it himself, he passed the information on to me. And so that's how we got our first piece of ground. And then slowly, as you go, you continue on with your business, you start to pick up a little bit more ground. That's, you want to be growing in this business because you really need to have about 1,000 acres to be a successful full-time farmer. And so that's really hard to obtain, especially when land is, it's very expensive. I mean, it could be anywhere between 7, 10, sometimes up to $14,000 an acre. And so you think about, 1,000 acres, 100 acres is $1 million, $10,000 an acre. So very capital intensive. And so you slowly try and get into it and gain enough ground. A lot of guys end up renting some ground, which is nice as well. But, it's my goal for, I was listening to some of your interviews, and I know that the general theme is, going into entrepreneurship, doing things for yourself, being your own boss. And so one of the things that I really wanted to do when I got into farming was, I wanted to be my own boss. That's what really inspired me to do it. When I was at the Board of Trade, you kind of are your own boss, but you don't necessarily own your own accounts. They're owned by the firm. So I wanted to have something I could pass on to my children. So when I got into farming, I knew that I could always pass on the land. Even if my son or daughter, my son's 3, my daughter's 6, even if they don't want to get into farming, I'll still have something to pass on from that business to them, and so they can manage the land or at least have that someday. So,
was there anything in when you were trying to see the land, vet out the land? Was it more just the recommendation of this Robbins gentleman that was your mentor, or did you see it as like, hey, this type of land will produce this type of crop, or is it all kind of the same? You just wanted a piece of land to really get started. It's really tricky finding land because it's not like open information. It's not like you're with a house. You can see the bedrooms, you can see the floor plan, you can get an inspection. With farmland, it's a little bit different. You have land, and then you kind of have to go to. There's not really a public record of what kind of yield is on that land. So you really have to develop those relationships and talk to the people in the area and see, is this a decent farm? Look at soil samples if they're available and see if it's decent soil quality. And worst case is you can amend the soil to some degree, but
you really, once you've purchased a farm that's not the best soil, it's harder to do. You want to get something that's highly productive. So that relationship really helped finding decent ground that would actually produce and get decent yields that I know I could be successful with.
So that kind of laid the foundation. You got your first acreage per se, and you start farming. So was it that summer that laid the foundation of what you needed to do the next harvest or the next planting season? How did you put your machinery together? What did you start thinking about? Was it just you? Did you recruit some family? How does that work that first year or two going in?
I got a taste after that first year working, just kind of working alongside for eventually it was harvest, so more into the fall, but kind of got a taste for it. But once you get into it, there's just so many different nuances that you just don't see until you actually get into it. So it's kind of baptism by fire. You learn along the way. But one of the biggest things was developing relationships and knowing the right people to contact. Because once I got into it, as I said, farming is so capital intensive. It's I started out with I purchased the land, and then you have to purchase the equipment. Most farmers, that might get passed down to them, or they might be able to borrow a piece of machinery. That wasn't an option for me. So after I purchased the land, I had a winter to start picking up the equipment that I needed. I knew basics of what I needed to do, and then just slowly kind of learned along the way. Read a lot and learned a lot by just watching other people, asking a lot of questions as problems came up.
Neat. So you start developing this, formula per se for your own, right? I mean, you saw someone that was an expert in it. You got some great mentorship, and it seems like now you start buying some equipment. What kind of capital would you say it kind of initially took to really get things started, and then we'll kind of transition?
Sure. That's one thing. You have to have a certain amount just to get going. I'm not one that likes to borrow too much, but you have to some degree, especially in farming, just because it is so expensive. So the land is expensive right there. But then, if you would buy new equipment, then you're paying. I mean, you're never going to make that money back as someone who's just starting. So as I mentioned, a combine is, if you get a corn head and a bean head with it, you're looking at close to $1 million for something like that, depending on what brands you get and what all the bells and whistles. So just for the combine, that's just a harvest. A tractor can range anywhere from $150,000 to over $300,000 for something new. So if you buy something used, the spread's much. It's a pretty big spread between something new and something that's old. You can still make the old stuff work, but you got to make sure you have the right technology, that you're not too far behind. So finding used equipment, I would just search for used equipment as much as I could, all the spare time, just searching for something that was the right price, that had the right features, and then bounce it off of the people that I met along the way. Hey, do you think this is good? Because there's really not a school to learn this. You have to learn along the way. So, but of course, I started with some older equipment, much cheaper than what those prices I mentioned for new, but still pretty capital intensive. And so that's probably one of the biggest challenges in farming that I found is just the upfront costs, and then also with farming, you don't get paid monthly. You don't get paid every couple of weeks. You get paid once a year, and so you're waiting for that paycheck. And even say prices aren't what you thought they would be at harvest, then maybe you want to wait another 6 months to a year until you sell your crop. So you might go over a year before you actually get paid. So in the meantime, you're just putting more money into the business, making investments, trying to make the right decisions for the future when you can actually get that money back. So that's definitely one of the bigger challenges.
That's really interesting. I mean, obviously you're kind of forecasting. You're hopefully did your homework, right? I'm assuming many variables are into that, and having that experience of trading the commodity. Do you feel like it did give you a little bit of an advantage?
It gave me a huge advantage, just because one of the struggles that I had with when I was a broker is trying to convince farmers to actually use the market to hedge. And so when the prices were high, farmers, people in general, when prices are high, you think, hey, they can go higher. So, just those conversations with farmers, talking them into, hey, when these prices are high in the spring, maybe you want to lock in prices and take advantage of this now. So that definitely came in handy for farming, just because I use my own advice. And so I didn't have to wait till harvest to lock in my prices when prices are generally a little bit lower. Obviously, when everyone's selling their crop at the same time, supply and demand, prices are going to be a little bit lower. So I always sold forward so I could take advantage of prices before everyone started selling. So that definitely helped me in the long run. I still to this day don't have any bins on my farm. A lot of farmers will store their crop on their farm and then eventually sell it when prices are higher. But there's a cost to that. And so I was able to avoid some of those costs and use the market to my advantage.
Wow. Well, hey, there you go. Go for CEO community. Listen to what he just said. Learning something of what he did prior to starting the business really gave him that kind of that ignition, that firepower to know the decisions he had to make. So now, here's one thing I remember managing in the banking world, a branch in Hinckley, Illinois. So you're probably familiar with Hinckley. I got to ask you this because it's just a fun question to ask, and I think I'm getting it right, but are you a red machine guy or a green machine guy? They would always tell me that in Hinckley. Are you green or red?
I usually go with whatever the best, the best features, the best deal was.
Okay.
So I've got a little bit of red and green. So,
okay.
So I can't really say either way which side I'm on, but no, they're both great machines. So.
But that's the proper saying, right? I mean, I remember the gals at Hinckley.
A lot of guys are either one way or the other.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Awesome. I did want. You were telling me about the machines and buying and kind of doing the research, and I'm like, man, is this guy a red guy or green guy? So, just from the little bit I know, so interesting. So now you start getting into this a couple years into it. You said 2013 is when you started.
2013. Then I really went full-time 2016, so it was a slow progression for me. I was still doing brokerage in Chicago and slowly got myself into it. Got my feet wet for a few years and then decided, hey, I can actually make this work. So we purchased the land and actually had, they call it custom farming, where you have another farmer doing most of your work for you, but you're still managing the farm. So you're kind of a farm manager. And so I did that for a few years. Learned as much as I could along the way. So it's not like I jumped right into it. I think that could have been a disaster looking back if I would have. But so slowly got enough information to figure out what I needed to do. 2016 and 2017, I went in full time and just strictly farmed. Aside from also trading on the side. That's one thing with farming, especially if you didn't grow up on a large farm. You kind of have to have another side income in some fashion, just because farming is so unpredictable.
Sure.
And you don't know when you're going to get paid. So it's pretty hard to farm. As a new farmer, it's pretty hard to do that without being in a very established farm. Just because like I said, you might get paid once a year. You might get paid once every 2 years, depending on when you sell. So a slow start definitely helped me with that.
How have you started to manage now? Traditional business. When you think about the regular businesses out there, cash flow is king, right? And managing your cash flow, understanding what your aging reports are and your receivables and all these types of things. So to give us a little insight, once you started to figure out, okay, I'm getting paid at harvest, did you start to, I guess, put a formula together of your own? Did you buy software that kind of taught you, like, hey, I'm going to have to keep about 60% of my revenues to reinvest, or how was that formula for you?
No, I definitely had a calculation of what I thought I needed to spend for the year. So that was one of the things I figured out before I even got into it full time. Because I knew it was going to be capital intensive. I knew I was going to have to spend a lot of money, but then also have more money to invest in the farm throughout a growing season, and then also not get paid and keep up my own household expenses and things like that. So definitely had a stash away for that. But just kind of came up with it. Didn't have an actual software program for it, a little bit more pen and paper, but yeah, you definitely have to plan ahead, especially when you know you're not going to get an income that's steady. So
Sure. And do you set up different accounts as far as banking wise for a farm so that you can handle the taxation of it, or is there some differences of taxation that you could take advantage of by owning a farm? And the reason that obviously you harvest once a year, so is there any nuances to that?
um, not necessarily. We file it pretty normally. I don't. We don't do anything more probably different than what a regular business would do. So
Awesome. So let's go into now. You've gone into production. You've started to learn a rhythm. You got your cash flow, understanding some of that. Who do you sell to? Like how does that work? I mean, obviously you're producing, but did you already vet out accounts? Did you knock on doors? Did you ask your mentor maybe to some access to some people that he was selling to? How does that work so that you have your crop, but who the heck do I sell to?
sure. Well, with corn and soybean farming, there's elevators throughout the country, and so there's usually for like in our area, there's about 3 or 4 elevators that are in a pretty close proximity that we could sell to. So there's one that's about a mile away, and I generally like to use them just because they're close. But then within 10, 15 miles, there's about 3 other elevators that I can use. And generally, you're going to get paid more if your quality's higher. So it's not necessarily that someone would turn you away. It would just be a discount on your grain when you deliver it. But there's a few places that you can use. You're not selling it directly to any individuals. You're selling it to a wholesaler that would clean your product. They'll end up selling it overseas or selling it to a food company. Ingredient companies nearby in the Chicagoland area mostly is where my product goes, just because I'm non-GMO. So there's an elevator that's just down the street from me that we generally sell to when we do non-GMO beans. And they will sell seed to other farmers, or they might sell to some of the food companies in the Illinois or Midwestern area, so it doesn't go too far. But every once in a while, you hear about cargoes going over to Japan and different overseas countries. So, but generally, it's pretty easy for a grain farmer to find someone to purchase their product.
Oh, interesting. Now, is there also something to the fact that you could go direct? I was trying to think of maybe, where's the branding of your business coming from? Or are you kind of low key? It doesn't really matter in the marketplace if you have a name. You're just already known as this producer, this manufacturer of crop. Or do you want to brand a name in your business?
In farming, it's a little bit different. There's not that big brand recognition. I guess with the people that you deal with, there might be some brand recognition because they know, hey, this guy's going to produce a certain amount. They'll try and work with those farmers that can produce a decent amount, just so they know that they can fulfill their contracts that they have with some of their customers. But as far as brand recognition, it's just it's not the same like with other companies. Once you get into specialty crops, it's a little bit different. So we have dabbled with that a little bit. We did specialty crops being like anything other than corn and soybeans and wheat for the most part. So we sold garlic. We grew garlic for a while.
Oh, wow.
We're starting to grow some other vegetables, some other things aside from corn and soybeans. When it gets into that, you're going to be dealing with you're closer to the end user, or dealing more directly with them. So you might, instead of dealing with grocery stores, then along with the supply chain, you might so instead of just selling to an elevator, that would eventually sell to an ingredient company or a food processor, and then to another food company, and then eventually get to the grocery store, and then eventually get to the final customer. With specialty crops, you might sell in farmers markets, so your brand is more important then, because you might bring your farm stand out to a farmer's market. They might look for that brand because the person who's actually buying your tomatoes or whatever you're selling, they have that brand recognition. But for most farmers, most large farmers, grain farmers, the brand is not as important, or at least it's not as significant in their business.
Okay, so you build your kind of your network. You've got your elevators that buy from you. Is there any stagnation between servicing them and giving them the crop and you getting paid? Is there like a net 30, net 45, net 90? How does that cash flow work for you?
It depends. It depends on the elevator, and it depends on the relationship that you have. So there are some elevators that might take a little bit more time to pay you, but there are some elevators that they would write you a check on the spot. So once you deliver it, they would weigh it, you dump it, and then they would literally give you a check right then and there.
Okay.
So
almost.
It just depends on the relationship and the elevator, the policies that they have.
I almost equate it, and tell me if I'm totally off here, but almost like that scrap metal, right? Like you get a bunch of stuff, you bring it over to the yard, and they take a weight, and they just cut you a check, right? So
yeah, there's some similarities, yeah.
Some similarities to it. Neat. That's why I love business. I mean, I love, creating this channel. I think, a lot of it is about, that mentality. So tell us about, I guess now 3, 4, 2013, you kind of did it part-time, get to a full-time status. I mean, what's your mindset now? What do you think about, are you vetting out, the next plot of land that you're looking to buy? Are you networking so that you can kind of get that next deal? Maybe that family that's right across the street has another 100 acres and you really want to get it. What's your strategy going into the next few years?
Sure. So in farming, you're always looking for another piece of land. It's kind of a luxury to be able to buy one, another piece of ground, but you're always looking to expand. And anything I make in the farm, I put right back into it. And basically, long term, I'm thinking about what I can pass down to my kids. When I got into farming in the first place, that's one of the things I was really trying. That was my biggest goal: is what I could be able to pass down to my kids. When I was in the commodities industry, I could have kept my career till retirement and probably have done quite well. But would I have been able to pass on my customer base to my kids? That was questionable. Would the industry be around? That was questionable as well. I know with farming, people have got to eat. I know that there's always going to be a need for land. So since that was one of my number one goals initially, I want to make sure I'm sticking to that and having something I can pass down. And so right now we're kind of branching off from the grain side of the business, the corn and soybeans, to try and figuring out how we're going to get into the specialty crop business, something my daughter can get involved in. One of the nice things about farming is you basically own a factory, and the possibilities are limitless because you can grow anything you want and then create another side business from it. So if my daughter doesn't want to be an actual farmer, she can take the product from the farm and then create another product. So if she wants to have her own pickle company or spice company or whatever, we can grow those products on the farm, and then she can take that and turn it into her own business. So I've always valued entrepreneurship and being responsible for your own success. And so I want to instill those values in my kids, and I want to give them an avenue to do that. So really the farm at this point is for my kids. I want to make sure I've given them something that they can turn into something greater. So that's what I'm really focused on right now.
What an awesome legacy is what we're talking about there, right? The transition of our generation compared to then leaving something pretty awesome that you actually had that foresight, 7 years ago, and then now you've kind of developed that. You have a 6 and a 3-year-old, so they're not at it yet. Are they working the farm at all? And I guess we could transition into who is working for you. How do you set that up, and what's the dynamic of the working of the crops? Because I'm assuming you're not the only guy, unless now it's all through automation. You just take these machines and play with it.
Not there yet. it's amazing the technology in the equipment lately. So I still drive my tractors myself. I
Okay.
can't turn it on autopilot, but there are a lot of farmers that actually have auto steer on their tractors, so they'll stay in a straight line. It'll follow GPS, and so if you look at a farm field that where the lines are just perfectly straight, you can't see any bend. Those are usually the guys that aren't driving it completely by themselves. You still have to turn at the end of the rows, but as far as going down the rows, the lines are perfectly straight. So eventually, it'll probably get to some point where you could be behind a computer, managing your farm, but not there just yet. So.
Awesome. So, and then workers, how do you manage that? Do you have a staff that is seasonal? Give us a little dynamic of kind of the operation side and your employees.
Yeah, it's mostly seasonal. So a farm generally has its busy seasons, and then aside from that, it's a lot of monitoring. You might when over the winter season, you're kind of planning for the new year. You're deciding, you're purchasing your inputs, so a lot of time is involved with that. You're talking to your seed supplier, you're talking to your fertilizer supplier, you're talking, you might be getting soil samples done, a lot of preparation. And then once spring planting comes, it's something that could generally be done with one person, depending on how big of a farmer you are. For me, I can get my planting done for the most part by myself. Sometimes I'll employ someone part-time just to help me out for a few days during spring planting, but it's really hard to have a full-time employee on a farm just because, first of all, there's seasons. So being able to employ someone and keep them busy year-round is tough, but also it's very weather dependent. So you might tell someone, hey, I'm going to need some help next week. Well, the weather forecast looked great when you told them that, but it might rain all week, and then or it might rain a couple days in that week. And so if you were planning to have someone out on a Wednesday and it rained on a Monday, the field might not be dry enough to get into it. The tractor might get stuck, the planter might get all gummed up because it's not dry enough. You want a dry field when you plant. So it's tough to plan around employees. And so unless you have some family members that are really flexible, or if you have some laborers that are flexible as well, it's tough to have someone full time. So a lot of times I'll employ some help from family. Some friends have come out to the farm as well, but harvest is usually the one where I can plan a little bit more just because I know I'm going to be able to keep them busy. So even if it rains after we've harvested some crop, put it into the grain truck or wagons or whatever where we're storing it to bring it over to the elevator, I could at least plan ahead and think, okay, well, I can hire someone here, even if it rains, then they can drive the grain to the elevator. So harvest is a little busier, and so there's a little bit more opportunity for people to work. But on a farm, it's pretty tough to employ someone that's maybe outside of your family. So you really have to work around people that are very flexible. Or also you can talk with other farmers who might not be busy at that time because they just harvested their fields. They've got some, a period of time where their workload is light, so they might be able to help you out. So then you employ them hourly. So it's mostly hourly.
Okay.
That's kind of how it works.
And are they independent contractors per se at that point, or?
Yeah, at that point, for the most part, yeah.
Okay.
So and then there's another aspect of even if you are a full-time farmer farming yourself, you might farm out some of your chores to another farmer who does custom farming. So say if you're spread out, your fields are spread out, and you're not going to be able to spray your crop over the summer in time because you're working on another field or whatever time constraints, you can talk to another farmer. They might be able to spray your field. So you pay them. It's called custom farming to some degree. So there's a lot of different places you can pull from, and it's a lot of decisions on the fly, and it's weather dependent. There's planning ahead, but once God decides to change the weather on you, then you might have to change things up a little bit.
Yeah, him and Mother Nature, they have their own mind of their own sometimes, right? So,
That's right.
And then that's it's interesting, right? So you're kind of plotting out a bunch of different dynamics of this business, and certainly a little bit different than traditional business. What would you say? I guess we kind of touched on it a little bit, but give us a little bit of a sense. Is also some of the back end stuff. So are you then, when you're selling to these grain companies, is there, I guess you've plotted out, hey, I harvested X amount of bushels or things. I mean, give me a little bit. I'm not on the lingo side of things, but trying to understand and help people that are watching this right now. How are you kind of formulating that idea? If it's just to the grain companies or to the grain elevators, I'm sorry, then is it these specialty products that add a little bit more value to jar up your own things or go to farmers market? I also want to ask, and I'm throwing a bunch of stuff at you, so I apologize, but is the specialty one a farm to table type of scenario? Does it create this type of business model where it's a farm to table because of those specialty products?
You could definitely go that direction.
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot of, once you grow the specialty products, I mean, you could sell it at a farmer's market, you could sell direct to a grocery store, or
Restaurant.
you could get involved with farm to table, or there's different programs where you could get involved in there's sort of clubs or groups where guys like you might say, hey, I want some fresh vegetables delivered every week, or I want to be able to pick up fresh vegetables every week, and then they might be able to tell you which farmers are producing what type of vegetables or what kind of type of crops and when it might be harvested. So there's a lot of different avenues you can go with the specialty crops. When it comes to grain farming, as far as who you sell to, what they might dictate that you produce, with specialty crops, you want to develop those relationships beforehand, just because you might be working with, say, like, depending on what type of farmer and what region you're in, maybe say you're working with Del Monte and they want you to produce a certain number or type of, melons or whatever. And so you'd be working with them and you produce what they want. With grain farming, it's a little bit different for most grain farmers. If you're planting conventional corn or soybeans, you can pretty much sell to any grain elevator that you have a relationship with. Once you get into some of the non-GMO, then you want to have that relationship and that contract in place beforehand. Sometimes with non-GMO, they might tell you, we want you to grow this number of or this specific variety of soybeans, and so you would purchase the seed from them. You plant their seed. They know how many acres you're going to produce. They have a range of how much yield you're going to get from that, and so then they would sell that contract to someone from anywhere in the world. And so with non-GMO, there's a little bit more background where you might sell forward with them and give them an idea of what you can produce. But as a farmer, you don't know what you're going to produce because it's heavily weather dependent. But you have kind of a range. So with non-GMO, definitely a little bit more upfront decision making. But for a lot of farmers, it's they'll decide what kind of crop they want or what variety of corn or soybeans they want to grow. Mostly depending on what type of if they think they might pick one brand because it's they think it's going to have a better yield. And so they've got that brand. They've always grown that brand. They know their salesman, but that salesman is not necessarily connected to the grain elevator that they're going to eventually sell to. Non-GMO is a little bit different. So,
is there a better spread? Maybe I guess a profit margin per se, or does it yield a little bit different results?
I guess it's kind of arguable whether or not you get better yields with one versus the other. I think it kind of depends on the variety, but generally the thought is that you get a little bit less yield with non-GMO, and so you can be rewarded for that when you go to finally sell your crop. So non-GMO usually has a premium. For soybeans, it's anywhere from $1 to $2 premium, and when you're looking at around $10 a bushel, that's significant percentage-wise. It's a little bit more difficult in some ways to grow non-GMO because you can't use certain chemicals on your crop, and we weed control is probably one of the biggest nemesis for farmers, just because it's tough to grow a decent crop when you've got weeds in the field. So with non-GMO, it's a little bit harder to keep the weeds at bay. So there's different methods that you can use to do that. Sometimes it's a little bit more labor intensive. You might have to run a tractor through with a cultivator, which would actually tear up the ground a little bit and actually cut the weeds down, as opposed to using like chemicals, which you could use on conventional corn and soybeans a little bit more than you can with non-GMO. So with that extra bit of labor and just the lack of options, there's a little bit of a premium there.
Nate, and just so it's, I want to make sure I educate the audience. I know a little bit of GMO. It's genetically modified, but I can't get the O. What is the O?
Organism.
Okay, all right.
Genetically modified organism. Yeah.
Organism. All right, awesome. And are you then classified? Is that organic per se, or is that completely different?
Organic's a different category.
Okay.
Organic is much more difficult.
Oh wow.
I would say it's much, at least in my opinion, it's much more difficult because you can't use any chemicals. So everything is much more manual. You can't spray certain fertilizers on your crop. You can't spray a lot of chemicals that are not considered organic. And so you have generally a little bit less yield. It's harder to keep the weeds at bay. And so if you don't keep the weeds at bay, then you're going to lose some yield. Just because the weeds are going to start to take over some of those nutrients in the soil. So organic farming is very difficult. So there's not too many guys that actually do it, but the guys that do it get a pretty hefty premium. So and it changes all the time. I can't tell you off the top of my head what it goes for per bushel. So for like corn, I know a few years ago when corn, conventional corn was selling for like $3.50, $4 a bushel. Organic corn was selling for close to $10 a bushel, or even more in some places. So there's definitely premium multiples of premium there, but it's really difficult. So there's a reason why I'm not doing it.
There's a reason it's whole check at Whole Foods.
Yeah.
Right. Whole paycheck. Right. So. Yeah, and that's the unfortunate part. I mean, I think one of the things with society, it seems like, I know that once we got pregnant, my wife was completely like just turned everything off, went totally organic. So 2011 was our transformation. I just eat everything, and then all of a sudden she got really intense about organic. And now, granted, sometimes I'm like, does it really matter? Does it make sense? Well, some of those things that even on non-GMO, right? I mean, you could see some of the words on some of these monohydroxysic, tetra and I'm like, what the heck is all this crap we're doing? So it's a interesting time, to see that as a farmer. So, I'm very interested on that specialty one, and you mentioned kind of a long-term vision of maybe your daughter, even an example of her own pickle business or something like that. So do you see that as a scalable part of your, and how do you, I guess, determine if you've got 100 acres, do you then take a certain part of the land because you know that it's going to produce X, and then now you could create this new business out of it? To walk us through that, and then we'll kind of start ending up the podcast.
Yeah, our plan right now to get more into specialty crops. So obviously we've dabbled in them a little bit, but we just take a small percentage of the farm. Start out really small because it's going to be trial and error. Whenever you're starting to grow a new crop, there's a lot of different things that you need to learn, and it's not necessarily the same every time or for every farmer. Your soil type might be a little bit different. You might not be able to produce as well, so you might have to amend the soil. So you want to start out small. So for our farm, we take a very maybe 1% of our farm, and we'll try out a specialty crop. So last year we tried. We actually dabbled in hemp just because it was. It was legal in Illinois to try that, and so a lot of Illinois farmers did that to try and boost their revenue a little bit, just because the numbers were amazing. So we did that on a very small piece of ground just to see if we wanted to do that. We decided that's not for us, and so we're not going to do that again. But if we would have taken our entire farm and put it into that, that would have been really risky for us to do. So going forward, we're taking just a few acres at a time and slowly moving them into other crops. So my daughter really likes, different hot peppers and spicy peppers. And so she wants to do a bunch of little things with that. And so we're going to take a small piece, not a whole acre, but, a small piece of ground and see how that goes and get her involved and actually get her out into the field and see if that's something that she really likes. And so we're giving her a little bit of autonomy with a small section of land. And so she can start out young and have that experience. And it's good experience for the whole family. So, but yeah, you start out small and then slowly see if it works, see if you can sell it, see if you can turn it into a product. And it's a trial and error.
That's awesome. Well, I love it. I mean, you're 6 years old and she's already attracted to kind of what you've put out there in the atmosphere of what you want to leave as a legacy. She's already testing out and stuff. I'd love to get our girls out there, make them work. I mean, free labor for you. Free labor for you, man. I definitely want to try that out if you're ever open to it. So, awesome, brother. So let's one of the last things that we do on the Go for CEO channel is really talk about client experience for the C of CEO, employee engagement for the E, and operational excellence. And it's that differentiator, right? That value proposition that you bring to the table. Standard, farm and what you guys do. I know it's a little bit different than the traditional, like, hey, here's my clients or et cetera. But you talked about grain elevators. You talked about maybe farm or farm to table type things. So what makes your farm a little bit different and a little bit better of that value proposition?
I think partly just because we're willing to try some new things. I don't think there's too many farmers that have, generational farmers that want to do things that are too different. They like to dip their toe in the water, try things out a little bit, kind of like what I said with the specialty crops. But it's really hard to get them to try some new things. So because I'm newer to this industry, I'm a little bit more open to trying new things, especially if the profit margins make sense. I'll instead of dipping my toe in the water, I'll jump in halfway. And there's not too many farmers that want to do the non-GMO right now, and I was open to doing it. And so I think that kind of makes us a little bit different. We actually had a few years ago one of the only non-GMO seed plots in the area, and so a lot of different farmers were able to go to our seed plot and see how it performs versus the conventional. So it's a comparison of different varieties. And so the local elevator that deals in non-GMO was pretty excited that we were actually even willing to have that on our property, because there's a little bit of a stigma for, when it comes to non-GMO or organic, it's just something that is not really promoted right now. And so I was willing to do that, and I think that kind of separated our farm a little bit, just because I was willing to try some of those things.
Well, I've got to say thank you, man. I mean, I think a lot of people hopefully will support, through the inroads of where your product actually comes from to get your stuff, because I think it's huge. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. Maybe the next interview we can talk about some of the differences and some of the toxins that are out there, unfortunately, and why people aren't changing, right? So, but employee engagement's the next one on E. I know that you talked about part-time seasonal. So what do you do maybe a little bit different to incentivize your crew? How do you keep them motivated? Are you always needing to kind of bring them back into the saddle, since it's kind of, off and on type thing? What's a little bit of the difference at your farm?
I think, it's not too hard to get people out to the farm, especially initially, just because, at least for me, it was kind of a boyhood dream to be able to work with heavy machinery or, be out and be a farmer. And I think when we're young, you're kind of conditioned to like some of those things with the toys that you get for Christmas and things like that. So I think people can live some of their childhood dreams by going out there, just even for a day. So it's not too hard to get people to help out here and there. And even, repeatedly. It's sometimes it's nice to just kind of clear your head. You don't have any distractions. You're out in the middle of the field. You're by yourself, and there's some there's a benefit to that for people. And so
Sure.
I think people get a lot out of it when they come to the farm, and so it's not too hard to get people out there. So the motivation is just the environment.
Awesome. And then last one is operational excellence, right? I mean, I know that there's a lot to it, understanding weathered patterns, understanding kind of how your soil is being treated, testing, getting ready for planting, then going through the growing season and harvest. But what makes the difference in your business that you've kind of gotten into this 3 or 4 or 5 year now full-time rhythm of what the difference is at your farm?
I think it's just trying to identify what works and what doesn't, and then continuing on with what does. There's a lot of different things you can try, and there's things that work, things that don't, and so just really focusing on what works and continuing to do that.
Awesome, brother. Well, hey, I really want to thank you, man. You're our first voyage into the farming industry, and certainly hope that people will really take advantage of listening to this and replaying certain sections that I thought were super valuable. So, one of the traditions that we're building here at Go for CEO is to tune in with you in about 6 to 12 months, just kind of see how you're doing, what the next levels are. Would love to hear about some of that specialty products going into 6 months or 12 months from now, to hear kind of what you did. Maybe you just stayed the same, but you're planning, a year or two from there. So that's the plan, is to re-engage with you, have people really kind of see where the farm goes and where you and your family, take that legacy too. So thank you so much for being a part of the Go for CEO community, Brad.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
All right, brother. Thank you. Awesome. So cool. Let me end this.